Some are born great, some have greatness thrust upon them, and some eat their way to greatness at the annual Coney Island hot dog eating contest. It's the Super Bowl of Major League Eating, so I have to watch it every year. I realize it's disgusting watching people stuff their faces with over 60 hot dogs in 10 minutes, but it's oddly fascinating. So just as competitive eaters repress their gag reflexes so they don't have a reversal of fortune, I repress the feeling that there is something seriously wrong with competitive eating. I mean, these people are wasting ridiculous amounts of food and purposefully making themselves sick for the entertainment of terrible people like me. And I'm not alone in avoiding thinking about such moral issues. Americans are morally lazy. We avoid genuinely reasoning about what we ought to do. This affects the decisions we make every day. Researchers at the Norwegian School of Economics and Business Administration have found that moral reflection affects our behavior by influencing our perceptions of fairness. When we fail to overcome moral laziness and are not willing to think critically about ethical issues, we can't confront our prejudices or challenge the status quo. First, we'll swallow the reasons behind moral laziness, then we'll stomach the impacts, before finally ingesting some solutions. First, let's think about what we've done and ask why we're being morally lazy. With morality, there are rarely easy answers, so we stop asking the important questions. The way ethics is taught in elementary schools reflects this. Professor of philosophy Christina Hoff-Sommers describes one method known as values clarification. It maintains that teachers should never directly tell students about right and wrong. Instead, students must discover values on their own. This, according to Sommers, is a bit like putting them in a chemistry lab and saying, "Discover your own compounds, kids." Teachers provide no structured way to develop values, or even discuss good character. Out of fear of indoctrinating children, schools end up indoctrinating them with the idea that it doesn't matter what they believe. But it's not just schools that are to blame. Another reason behind moral laziness is a well-meaning, but misguided, desire to be nice. Many people default to relativism, the belief that there are no moral codes that apply to everyone, and it's wrong to impose our beliefs on others, out of a desire to be, well, nice. However, according to Robert Simon, a professor of philosophy at Hamilton College, one benefit of moral dialogue with others is that it can expose our own biases and open them to critical examination. When we recognize how our biases affect and even taint our moral judgments, we can be more objective in our evaluations, and we can better understand other viewpoints. Defaulting to relativism prevents this by insisting morality is a matter of opinion, and no moral code is better than any other. But if our moral convictions are a matter of preference, on the same level as our opinions on Justin Bieber or One Direction, grilled stuffed burrito or quesarito, and Team Edward or Team Jacob, there is no reason for further discussion when we disagree, since preferences can't be right or wrong. Not only is this position ethically lazy, but reducing people's deepest convictions to mere preferences isn't nice. It's condescending, and ultimately an attempt to make ourselves more comfortable. We want to avoid conflict and disagreement, so we avoid trying to understand other people's beliefs, and we trivialize them instead. But this leaves us with an inability to take an ethical stance on issues, so we can neither promote positive change nor condemn atrocities. Take, for example, Amazon reviews of Mein Kampf. Some readers try so hard to appear open-minded that they won't even say Hitler's actions were wrong. One reader says Hitler did some good for Germany, but he did harm to the rest of the people he thought inferior. On the net of things, the opinions tilt to more harm than good, although some disagree. Who exactly disagrees that the mass murder of millions of people clearly constitutes more harm than good? And yet, according to Amazon, 3 out of 4 people actually think this post adds to the discussion. These are not neo-Nazis. These are ordinary people who are unwilling to denounce Hitler because he was powerful. And if we can't bring ourselves to say Hitler was evil and the Holocaust was a moral atrocity, how can we expect anyone to condemn modern atrocities or speak out for positive change? Too often we don't speak out. According to the educational researcher, 35% of students report being bullied in the last 2 months. This is linked to what Robert Thornburg and Thomas Jungert of the Department of Behavioral Sciences at Linköping University in Sweden call moral disengagement, a process by which people ignore, distort, or minimize the immorality of their behavior to avoid treating others humanely. The study found that moral disengagement was high among bullies, whereas moral sensitivity, including empathy and the ability to recognize ethical issues, was high among bystanders, who intervened to defend the victim. Our ability and willingness to engage in moral deliberation is essential to overcoming apathy and taking action to help others. Now, I know I've been saying we up to this point, but I kind of meant other people, and even you. But moral laziness affects me too. I compete in Lincoln Douglas debate, and in LD, we use moral philosophy to support our case. Many times, I've avoided making arguments I believe in, and instead made arguments that were more strategic. Arguments that, at best, I doubt are true, and at worst, I find repugnant. I've heard many debaters say debate is just a game, and it doesn't matter what we say. The only goal is to win. However, to say it's only a game is to ignore the importance of the discussions we have in each round. When we trivialize the moral aspect of these debates, we forget that we are discussing issues that affect people in the real world. Debating these issues can help us better understand and articulate our beliefs, and to continually re-examine them. Fortunately, the solutions to moral laziness are straightforward. We can begin by educating ourselves. Familiarizing yourself with various moral philosophies is a great place to start. You don't necessarily have to read full books, I get it. Nietzsche's books can be denser than a clown car inside a black hole, and more self-referential than this sentence. But just searching the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for a basic understanding of utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, or contractarianism can help. Furthermore, we should not be afraid to discuss controversial issues like religion and politics. Amazingly, this can be done in a respectful way. Professor of philosophy Robert Simon writes, "Discussion of moral issues need not consist of two fanatics asserting conflicting principles they regard as self-evident. It can involve dialogue, the consideration of the points raised by others, and an admission of fallibility on all sides. When we are willing to respectfully acknowledge differences while genuinely trying to understand other viewpoints, we can learn a lot from each other. Instead of asking who's to say when there's disagreement, we can ask each other, why do you believe that?" Now, you may be wondering if after all this moral deliberation, I'm going to watch the hot dog eating contest again next year. I'd like to say I have overcome moral laziness and will never watch it again. But, on the other hand, it is, quote, "the battleground where God and Lucifer fight for human souls." I really wish I were making that up. The announcer actually said that. I'm going to have to work through this moral dilemma, but that's not a bad thing. It's when we are not willing to think critically about ethical issues that we fail to confront our prejudices or challenge the status quo. Once we recognize the causes of moral laziness, we can begin to re-educate ourselves and overcome apathy. Maybe next year, instead of Major League Eating, I'll watch something more wholesome, like Keeping Up with the Kardashians.